Now let's add some claws for our character's arm. So the first thing I want to do is take this wrist, and we're going to add the claws in these open spaces here. And I want one of the open spaces to align with one of the axes. And you can see that the one that aligns is this one over here. And it kind of aligns with this x-axis. So that's the one that we're going to use to build our initial claw. So let's do the initial claw just by bringing in a primitive cube. We'll kind of bring it down and move it over to that particular opening. Let's take our width up a little bit, our depth I'm going to take up to something like that, and then the height, I want to take that up a little. I'll kind of move it out like that. Take our height up a little bit more. So something kind of like that. It might be a little bit too deep. Now let's add some subdivisions along the height. So we'll just add a few subdivisions here so that we can start to shape this a little bit. Let's take these vertices, kind of move those in a little. And depending on what you want your claw to look like, I'm just going to make mine a little bit thicker here. Maybe pull this out a little bit to add a little bit more shape to it. Let's kind of narrow this in a little. And so just kind of create your own sort of shape there. Now I want to add a little bit more detail to this, so we're going to use our Insert Edge Loop tool. Let's use multiple edge loops, because I want to add a couple of edge loops right in here. So choose multiple, 2, and we'll just drop those right in there. Now with those new edge loops selected, with that new loop of faces selected between the edge loops rather, we'll go ahead and extrude those out to make some kind of raised detail there. All right. Now if I smooth this, it's going to look like that, which is a little bit too soft. And so I'm going to delete the faces up at the top, the ones that are kind of inside of there. And I'm also going to come in and add some sharp lines in here. And we have to remember to reset our Insert Edge Loop tool. And so I want to sharpen this up a little, so I'm going to add some edge loops right in there. Now the sides aren't very sharp, so we can fix that just by coming in and adding those loops. All right, so we get something along those lines. And if we want to sort of scale it up, we can kind of do that. But now let's come in, and I want to take the pivot of this. Okay, and I just want to also make sure that it's kind of extending up and in side of there. And then I'll take this whole thing and use either the D key or the insert key. I'm going to move the pivot up, kind of right in there. So if we were to rotate it, we could rotate it in and out and be able to kind of add that claw. Let's move our wrist shape back a little bit, so we have a little bit more room to rotate it around. All right. Now, kind of something that is cool is the fact that we can instance this around, and it'll enable us to rotate one and the others will rotate automatically. So in order to do this, we need to rotate it around the origin. So we need the pivot to be at the origin. So all we have to do is hit Control G to group this. Let's go into Duplicate Special. And so you can see if I rotate that group, it's going to rotate right around the wrist, right around the arm. And so we need to create a kind of subdivide this 360 degrees into 3 separate sections. And so that's going to be, the first one is going to be rotating, if we take a look here, about 120 degrees, if we do our math correctly. And so we want to choose geometry type instance. So we're going to be instancing this group, and let's actually call it something before we instance it. So we'll call this claw group, and we'll call the geometry claw base. All right, so hit the up arrow to go to the group. Now we want to rotate it around the Y. So in the Y box right here under rotation, we're going to set that amount. So we decided it needed to be 120 degrees. And the number of copies makes sense. We want 3 total. So we already have 1. We'll make 2 copies. So let's go ahead and duplicate special. And that creates our other claws. Let's take a look at what happens if we select this claw and begin to rotate it. You can see the other ones rotate as well. So it's kind of nice to have. Let's go ahead now and take our pieces, our claw group, our wrist, parts of our gun. Let's actually select this. So this is, again, part of that other object. So let's drop this out, and then we'll delete the history on it. And now we can select everything that's involved with that arm, the lower arm that is. And let's group that together. Control G to group it. Now we can move it back up into position. So coming from the front, we can take this whole thing, put it up back into position. We can rotate it slightly. If we needed to scale the whole thing up, we could. But I'm going to get it close based on the artwork, and then I'm just going to use the pivot that we've got there and set it kind of right on the outside of that. And we can scale it up a little bit if we need to. So something along those lines. Okay, and then we can still come in and our claws still work, and our gun will work as well. So the next thing that we want to do, once we've got the claws finished up and the arm placed, is to go ahead and begin to add a little bit more detail. So we can come in on the front and add some kind of interesting detail in this little channel that we created. So let's do that next.